Well, let's talk to John Strickland, Director of JLS Consulting, an independent air transport consultancy in the UK. John, welcome. So Qantas says the worst of the pandemic is behind us. I guess the only way was always going to be up, but do you agree with the analysis?
Yes, it's got to be put in context. Of course, Australia had one of the most intense and prolonged lockdowns of anywhere in the world. So whether it is Australian citizens or Australians stuck abroad, there was a desperate desire to travel. So when they opened up in the last few months, the demand has just come flooding back. That's really positive for Qantas in particular, but other airlines as well. We've seen Qantas bring back some of their largest aircraft, the Airbus A380 double-decker. They've been opening up new long-haul routes, for example, from Perth to Rome and over to Delhi in India. Domestic travel has been very strong. They're saying we're also seeing a lot of strength in premium traffic in the business cabins as well. But they've also faced challenges along the way. As in other parts of the world, there have been big difficulties in terms of manpower shortages. A new term has even entered the Australian language, which is to say you've been joiced. Using Alan Joyce's name, that is to be messed up because Qantas has delayed or cancelled your flight. And those labour shortages have resulted in Qantas even asking a lot of their management to take on jobs such as baggage loading to help out in the coming months. And then the overall economic outlook, although as Qantas predicts the traffic is going to continue to go up, we are looking at significant pressures on consumers in a number of parts of the world where energy costs, household bills, particularly in Europe, are going to go up. And that will leave less disposable money for travel. And the airline itself, of course, is facing higher fuel costs. And the big unknown, of course, is whether we get any more challenges from COVID in the coming winter months, particularly in the European market.
Well, the past couple of years have, for obvious reasons, been dreadful. Who has suffered the most, can we now say?
Well, it varies by airline, but in terms of parts of the world, Asia, of which of course Qantas is a key player, has suffered the most because many Asian markets have been closed until recently. China, in particular, of course, although it's been quite buoyant in domestic travel terms, internationally is still effectively off limits. There's very little travel. We've seen Hong Kong, which used to be a major global hub, shrink to a shadow of its former self. Cathay Pacific, the airline based there, has flown as little as 2% of its pre-COVID capacity with a little bit of recovery now. The USA at the other end of the spectrum has been pretty buoyant, again, with a large domestic market, and European travel for leisure travellers in the Northern European summer and across the Atlantic have been also positive. But of course, again, in the Northern Hemisphere, with the challenge of the Ukraine conflict going on, we've seen suspension of air services to and from Russia, and airlines flying normally to Asia from Europe, if the markets were open, would quite often route over Siberia, and those Siberian traffic rights currently are suspended. So it's a very mixed bag. Some airlines doing well and others still struggling.
What's your outlook for the aviation sector for 2022? When you look at all these factors, the global slowdown, the cost of living crisis, rising interest rates and fuel costs, I mean, the way ahead is still rather bumpy, is it not?
Absolutely, and that's why no airline is willing to give guidance forward beyond a few months, because it's just too difficult to call. I think we've been seeing generally a boom summer this year with this pent-up demand, not just that which Qantas reported, but again, particularly in the US and Europe, people were desperately hungry to travel. They had money they hadn't spent and therefore available to spend this summer. Airlines have been seeing higher average prices beyond levels that I would have expected in many cases. But the question is how much of that can last into next year. And while I would like to hope we will not have a really challenging summer or a year of the kind we've been experiencing because of COVID, my own feeling is it will be somewhat softer than this year, but the impact economically will vary again by part of the world.
John, good to see you. Thanks very much for coming on the programme. John Strickland from JLS Consulting.